Millions watched the Final Four yesterday, broadcast by a network that paid billions to televise it. But there was one group in Indianapolis, of course, that won't ever see a dime: the players on the court. I'm now joined by Bloomberg View sports columnist Kavitha Davidson. Kavitha, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I was reading this HBO Real Sports / Marist poll a couple weeks ago about how the majority of the country still thinks we should not be paying college athletes. I'm curious to know your thoughts as a Bloomberg sort of business side of things.
Right. Well, I mean, they're employees. I think that we've established this. They are generating millions of dollars for their school and billions of dollars for the NCAA. And it's a little bit ridiculous that we still see them as, student athletes. It's a myth at this point. And the economic argument is a fallacy. And if these students were allowed to unionize, which is what they're trying to fight for right now, the market would pay them.
Well, I'm curious. So when you say that the economic argument is a fallacy, how? Because I think a lot of people just think that would be a lot of money you have to pay out, and they don't really understand the business behind it. What about it is that difficult that people are trying to argue we couldn't pay the athletes?
Well, there's obviously a ton of money out there.
Right.
And the question is, where is that going now that we would have to cut into to bring it to the athletes? And what it really would be is high athletic director salaries and high coaching salaries.
But the athletic directors do so much for the sport.
Right.
We should be paying them.
Right.
Like $1 million.
$1 million or $2 million, or even the coaches.
They've earned it. They're out there. What do they do?
It's a really good question, and some of them are actually really terrible at their jobs, and
Awful.
they still, they still stay there. It's a tenure system essentially, unless you're a high-ranking school. But there are so many other pools of money that we can be taking from that aren't. It wouldn't cut into women's sports. It wouldn't cut into Title IX.
Which is what everybody brings up. Title IX is the reason we can't pay athletes. Women, once again, you everything else up for us.
Right. Well, women are always going to be blamed for the reason that men are everything else, right?
Are bad, guys, are bad. The poll also showed something I found super interesting, was that a lot of Americans are also against letting an athlete major in their sport, which for me is that's not necessarily the answer. I think there's a lot of things that need to change. But why can't I go to school and major in basketball? I can go to school and major in dance.
Right.
So if you're going to say, well, what's that degree going to do? What if you don't make it to the NBA? Well, a lot of people I know that majored in dance are not in the American Ballet Company.
Right. Well, I mean, that speaks to the myth again. It's the idea that somehow having an athletic skill isn't as valuable as having an academic skill or an artistic skill. But the truth of the matter is, if you look at the revenue that they're generating and the money that we're actually, the monetary value that we're placing on their skill, they deserve to be compensated for it. They deserve to, it would actually be a lot more honest, frankly, if they majored in athletics instead of, communications or something.
Or pretending that they speak Swahili or whatever it is they're taking to get their stupid credits that they know they're not going to class.
Right, and classes that, the jock classes that don't actually exist with the UNC scandal that we've been seeing. It would be so much more honest if we actually let them major in the thing that they're there to do, which is play sports.
Well, also, what's the argument against, from a business standpoint? Can you see a real argument against why we can't pay them the way we would pay any other student who works at something on campus?
Right, well, no, there is really no argument. I mean, I think the argument is you obviously would have to pay them more than whatever the $8 an hour stipend that work study gives you.
But people love to be like, well, we can't afford to pay an amateur athlete millions. Well, that's sort of taking an argument that makes sense and trying to make it seem like it doesn't.
Well, you're taking it to its extreme
Exactly.
endpoint,
We're not going to pay an amateur
They're
millions
obviously
of dollars.
there's going to be a transition period. We're going to have negotiations. There's going to be a way to figure out what that number should be, but there should be a number is what it is. And it really just comes down to, people are very myopic and they look at their own experiences here, and they say, I worked really hard to either earn my scholarship academically or artistically, or, I came out of college with student loans. And why should these athletes get more? They're totally jealous.
They're just jealous.
But your artistic skill and your academic prowess didn't generate $1 billion from the NCAA tournament.
Exactly. You're not worth as much as you probably think you are, but he is, and he's getting paid nothing.
Right.
This is so interesting. I could talk to you for another hour. I hate that I have to cut this off. We have a half-hour show. Thank you for coming in. You're fantastic.